Hey, good afternoon, Northbound. I just want to say happy Veterans Day to all the veterans out there. And then to those who are still serving, thank you. And then for those who I served with, it was an honor to serve with you. Happy Veterans Day. And just honored. And it was such a pleasure to serve with you. I wanted to share a little bit of something today for Veterans Day. Here's a picture, and for the veterans out there, I know you've seen this picture probably a dozen times, but this is a picture of the Doolittle's crew, Jimmy Doolittle's crew, and the Doolittle Raiders. So let me just real quick, I'll go in order here of who you're looking at, who these gentlemen are. So right here, I think you can see my mouse. That is Lieutenant Henry Potter. He was the navigator. And then you have Jimmy Doolittle. He was the pilot. So Lieutenant Colonel James Doolittle. And then you have Staff Sergeant. He's kind of back, the guy in the back here. That is Staff Sergeant Fred A. Brammer. He was the bombardier. And then here is Dick Cole, Lieutenant Richard Dick Cole, and he was the co-pilot. And then you have Staff Sergeant Paul Leonard, who was the engineer gunner. And so for those of you who don't know the story, the Doolittle Raiders, their plan or mission was to launch B-25 Mitchell bombers off of the aircraft carrier USS Hornet, something that had not been done before. This was to surprise the enemy, the Japanese at the time. They were going to take off from the aircraft carrier with stripped down fuel, so they had very little fuel. They had actually stripped the aircraft of a lot of things as well so that they could be as light as possible so that they could take off bombers from an aircraft carrier first time. And they were going to bomb Tokyo and some other cities in broad daylight. That was the plan. And then they're going to head back to China because they can't make it and they can't land on the carriers. They got to land on land somewhere, and that was going to be China. So the plan was to land back there at the airfields that had been prepped. Here's the thing. We know now, they didn't know before they took off, but none of them were going to land at their airfields. Not one of those B-25s landed at the airfield that they were supposed to land at. And in fact, these gentlemen that you're looking at right here, the Doolittle crew, bailed out. They are one of the aircraft that they all bailed out of their aircraft. And Dick Cole, who I mentioned here, right here, the lieutenant, he spent the night in a tree. So he landed and he stayed in a tree. And this was a big deal. And they didn't know if they were going to make it. So not only had this never been done, but the 80 airmen that were going to take off that day and accomplish this mission did not know if they were going to live or die. Again, it had never been done. They were going to then land back in China if they could make it, which it turns out none of them made it to their airfields. They could be taken prisoner. They could become POWs, which 8 of the 80 did become POWs. They were treated very horribly. And so these guys, they were prepared for the worst. Well, I had the opportunity, while living in Louisiana, I had the opportunity to meet Lieutenant Dick Cole. He was the last surviving Doolittle Raider, and he passed away just a few years ago. But I had an opportunity to meet him because he was at a restaurant down in Bossier City. And I heard that he was going to be there, and so I had a print of a B-25 Mitchell bomber that I wanted him to sign. So with a couple of buddies, we jumped in the car. We drove down to the restaurant where we're going to meet with Dick Cole and get his signature. And so we went in there, and having known this story and just knowing all about these guys, I was pretty pumped up. Let's just start there. And then I also had a question for Dick Cole. And I said, sir, you guys are on the aircraft, the USS Hornet. And what are you thinking? Like, you don't know where you're going to land. You don't know if you're going to make it. What are you thinking? And I'll never forget his answer. He looked at me. He looked at us, actually, and he just said, we just did it. And he was almost like, I don't think he really understood my question. But he was clear after that we weren't thinking about any of that. We just knew that we had a job to do. We had a mission to accomplish. And so we just did it. That was it. That was his answer. Well, from a leadership perspective, it may seem a little reckless. but it's incredible leadership. And that's what this community is all about, is leadership, and is about leading boldly. That's bold leadership. If you read leadership material that is out there, you may see that leaders push themselves to act. Well, that's what they were doing. And you'll also taking risk. Leaders take risk. That's what they were doing. They might make a mistake. And in this case, they did not make it back to where they were planning to make it. Is that a mistake? Well, that's the risk that they took. They were willing to do it, and they were willing to make mistakes. They were willing to give it all, and they were willing to die, which is what veterans do. They risk their lives. They are willing to risk their lives for the nation. So, again, thank you to all the veterans that are out there who risk every day and also sacrifice your time every day in the service of this country. All right. Thanks, everybody. See ya. You just listened to another episode from the Northbound podcast. Thank you for tuning in today. I hope you are encouraged and empowered in leadership. Go lead boldly and humbly. And remember our vision. Elevate your team through Christ-centered leadership. If you want to be a part of our community, just go to go-northbound.com and follow the link and come join us. Follow along with courses and live streams and chats, and maybe even join us for an adventure. We'd love to have you. All of those links are in the description below. Thank you again for tuning in. It's been a pleasure. See ya.